don't know what you did. I'm gonna get beat on. How you feeling? I still need to get beat on. I would say I still need to get beat on. But I need to get beat on. I don't know what you did. I'm gonna get beat on.
Diddy's family leaving court, guys.
The daddy got 4 years. The daddy got 4 years. I'm in the street. Are you sad? But they got 4 years.
Ma'am, you gotta...
Your dad got 4 years. Your daddy got 4 years.
One second,
Your daddy got 4 years.
Justin, how you feeling? How you guys feeling?
Support this sexual sex party. Support the non-believers of people's bedroom. Mama, 4 years, guys. This Diddy's mom right here. Man, that's crazy. 4 years, 2 months, guys. That's what Diddy got.
Diddy was just sentenced to over 4 years in federal prison, putting an end to the freakiest case in hip-hop history. Acquitted on charges of racketeering and trafficking, which was a major win, back in July, Diddy was found guilty of 2 lesser counts of flying hoes out. After having 2 of his mansions raided and a ton of lubricating evidence being recovered, federal prosecutors asked for an 11-year sentence, but they were denied by the judge. Officially sentenced to 4 years and 2 months, Diddy has been given 14 months credit for the time that he's already served, so in total, he only has to serve 3 years. Now, federal prison, like the state of Florida, requires 85% of the sentence to be completed, so he'll be out in just over 2.5, putting his release date at 2028. Now, as far as federal prison, Diddy's going to be sent to either a low or a camp, meaning he's going to be nowhere near the violence, the gangs, the stabbings. I wouldn't be surprised if he's the life of the party and it ends up looking something like this. Diddy was just sentenced to over 4 years in federal prison, putting an end to the freakiest...
Yeah, man, Diddy about to be walking on y'all. I don't know how y'all feel about it, but he about to be free.
Officially delivering his sentence. He says to the court, he says to Sean Combs, at the outset, I want you to understand, Mr. Combs, you are not being sentenced for acquitted conduct. So he's not being sentenced for racketeering. He's not being sentenced for sex trafficking. But under 3553, which, by the way, is the federal statute regarding imposition of a sentence, under 3553, I must consider many things. Mr. Combs, you are a self-made artist who has inspired community of color. Okay, so we're stopping right there. We're waiting for these updates to come in real time. Serena, does that, like, I'm going to tell you, there's like a but, right? Yes, you've done many things,
this
but
is what we missed, guys,
that might not be
when
good
he got his
for Sean
sentence.
Combs.
When a judge gives any sort of remarks like that, there's always a but. And when you start hearing good things, be prepared for the flip side because it's coming. And I will say to your earlier comments about turning life around, this is a very different type of crime than your typical one-day event. You know, yes, he was a great guy in certain other aspects of his life, perhaps, but he was living a lifestyle of these crimes. It's very different from a defendant who appears in front of a judge who had one bad day, right? Got robbed one person, got into a fight with one person and stabbed that person. This was a lifestyle.
Okay, another update. Judge says, we saw the video. The free game course in the MDC, the court hopes you continue to expand it. You are devoted to your family. The court, of course, considers the collateral consequences. The court has to consider all of your history here. And when that's true, by the way, the factors to be considered in imposing a sentence are and this is, I'm looking at the statute, the nature and circumstances of the offense, the history and characteristics of the defendant, the need for the sentence to be imposed, the kinds of sentences available, the kind of sentence and the sentencing range, any pertinent policy statement, the need to avoid unwarranted sentence disparities among defendants. So, just looking for an update here. Okay.
Here it is.
A history of good works can't wash away the record in this case. You abused these women. You used that abuse to get your way. Freak-offs and hotel nights. The evidence of the abuse is massive. I was sitting right here during the testimony. Joe, this isn't good for Sean Combs.
No, it's not good for Sean Combs because he started off with good stuff and he says, but on the other hand, you know what I mean? Because to my mind, I mean, it could be different, but a lot of times you start off with the part, not with the part that you're going to end with. You know what I mean? Here's the good news, but here's the bad news, and here we are because of the bad news, as opposed to here's the bad news, and here's the good news, and here's where we are because of the good news. I think the order of things may dictate that, you know, he's going to come at him, and it's not going to be a low-end type sentence.
Sierra, this is very consistent with what we talked about before, where that video was being played of Sean Combs, where you look at his history of helping others, you look at his works in the community. You and I had talked about it. The argument would be, but at the same time, he was committing crimes.
Guys.
Or after his apology video for Cassie, he was accused of committing crimes. It seems that the judge is being consistent with this, and I apologize if I have to cut you off if the judge says something, but your thoughts?
No, please do cut me off because I want the updates as much as you do, Jesse, and so do our viewers. But I think it's confusing here, right? But two things can be true. P. Diddy can have all the love in the world for his children, and he can be a great dad to them. But on the other side of the coin, he did commit these acts, and it is violence. And I think the thing that was most telling to me from what we've heard. All right, let's hear that update, Jesse.
Sierra, I'm going to throw it right back to you, but this is the judge. This was subjugation. That is the reality of what happened. These offenses irreparably harmed two women. You plied them with drugs. Why did it happen so long? You had the power and resources to keep it going. You were more than a John. Again, Sierra, it was the idea of this happened so many times. I think that was something the judge was going to consider here.
And what he said very specifically is that I was sitting right here. I heard the testimony. And I think that is what is so vital when we were talking about the way that the judge was going to end up with all of this sentencing, is the fact that it wasn't today he decided it. It wasn't in the 3 months that he had to go through and read all of those letters. No, it was when he was sitting there in the courtroom, seeing Cassie and Jane and Mia and all of the testimony there, that this happened over and over again. It wasn't, to your point, to what Serena said earlier, this wasn't a one-time thing. This was a pattern of abuse that the prosecution put on and displayed, and then here we have a conviction. And so I do think that all of this is kind of running through Judge Arun Submarinian's mind as he's coming forth, putting down this sentence, because, I mean, it's really hard to ignore.
All right, Judge, this just came in. A significant sentence is required to deter. You say you're sorry and you won't do it again. After Miss Ventura's civil lawsuit was filed, after the video was public, an investigation started, you had a brutal hotel night with Jane, punched her in the head. Serena, that is the key here. That is something we have talked about during the course of the day. It didn't deter him. There were significant episodes that came out after the investigation, after the apology. He was arrested with materials in his hotel room that would indicate a freak-off. I think we're looking here at maybe 5 to 7. I don't know yet. What can happen any second, but I think we're looking at significant prison time here.
Yeah, I mean, I think the judge makes an incredible note that, you know, you've had the chance to deter. You were not deterred. You were given an opportunity over and over again, specifically during the investigation, and you can't be stopped. And if you can't be stopped, I'm going to have to be the one to stop you.
Yep. And by the way, the judge has considered his history. He said about the fact that, he became Sean Combs after his father died. That is especially impressive given the early violent death of your father and the trauma that must have left. So he's appreciating all this, but at the same time, he's hitting all of the factors and he's talking about the evidence that came out during the course of this trial. He just said, Jane says he told her, take this pill, go out there, bleep his bleep, bleep him, I don't care. The court is not convinced this would not happen again. The court has considered the programs. They are outweighed by the trial record in this case. Now I'm wondering here, Joe, are we talking double digits?
I think we're going a little higher. We'll see how high we go. But 5 to 7 at least, and maybe even a little bit more. That's what it's sounding like. And there's an argument that the record supports that. Diddy was extra arrogant, and the length of time, I think, is incredibly persuasive and moving for the judge. Obviously, this is not something that happened once or twice, and he got his hand caught in the cookie jar. This was
I don't
built
think
into
his baby all
what
the time.
Diddy did. This was his culture, and he was truly lawless. Just to put it where it really is. And so, the judge has been very honest about, I don't think that this deters you. And, I tell you, that tracks with me. Maybe we're all wrong, but to go off of what we've had happen and had said and had done and the trial record, that's not unreasonable for the judge to say that.
I am wondering also, Serena, if this is grounds for an appeal, where the court says I'm not sentencing you on racketeering or sex. Okay, hold on.
Absolutely, Sergeant.
Here we go.
Here we go.
Exploitation and violence against women must be met with real accountability to promote respect for the law. Okay, hold on one second. I'm getting the sentence right now. Okay, here we go. Oh boy.
I'm sweating.
Exploitation and violence against women must be met with real accountability to promote respect for the law. The court reaches a few conclusions. 135 months would be more than necessary. Now, I don't know if that means that that's the actual sentence right now, but 135 months is over 11 years in prison. So over 11 years in prison would be more than necessary. That's what the judge is saying.
I told you they wasn't doing that.
I don't know if that's the official sentence as of yet. We're waiting to get confirmation about that. But what does that say?
Well, just to throw that number out there like that means that at least he was considering the 11 years that the prosecution put forth, and maybe even more than that. It sounds like he's kind of tempering it, like that is more than necessary and it'll be less than the 11. But it also sounds like he at least considered it very seriously as an option.
Now I'm wondering, Sierra, are we talking 7 years? I mean, again, it's something we talked about earlier. Maybe the benefit of the family speaking and the benefit of the work that he's done was not to get to 11 years, but not to go lower than the 5 to 7 range. So that may have been the benefit, but I'm wondering if 7 years is what we might be looking at. Again, I'm waiting for official confirmation on the
I knew they
sentencing,
weren't
Sierra.
finna do 11, guys.
I think that is possible here, that maybe he's saying, okay, yes, the prosecution, the government brought forward this number of 11 years. Yeah, that is more than necessary based on, we actually have an update, Jesse. I'm going to throw it back to you.
Yep, a sentence over 11 years is not reasonable. So anybody that thought he would get 20 years, that's not happening. A sentence over 11 years is not reasonable. Even the probation department recommends a sentence less than half of that. But 14 months time served, that would not be sufficient. So he has rejected the defense's recommendation of 14 months. In other words, Diddy is not getting out of prison. He is not getting out of prison today. When he would, we're waiting. I'm not, it's not like I have these updates and I'm purposely delaying. I'm getting to them in real time as we are getting them. Sierra? So again, we're now looking at between 14 months and 11 years, but I guess, again, going back to this idea, we're looking at 7.
I mean, all speculation as of right now, but I think the most important thing is what you just said there, Jesse. P. Diddy, Sean Combs, is not getting out of jail
If you're
today.
new here,
And the
subscribe to the
14-month
channel.
recommendation that the defense brought has just been thrown completely out the window. The judge says, no, that's not sufficient enough. And I think what he's saying could
Make sure y'all double tapping that screen. If you new here, subscribe to the channel, man. Diddy sentence, guys. Diddy sentence.
be taken in a couple of different ways. One, that the 11 years is sufficient. Yes, I mean, based on your conviction here, because again, remember, this is a conviction. 11 years makes sense. It checks out. I agree with the prosecution. But to what Serena said earlier, perhaps, and we do have a new update. Jesse,
I think we have the official sentence right now for Sean Diddy Combs. After being convicted of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution, the judge has just said, here the data shows a wide variety of sentences. Weighing all of the relevant factors, the court determines that the sentence is 50 months of incarceration.
50 months?
So 50 months of incarceration is a little over 4 years. It's 4.16 years in prison. Now, that is a bit lower than what the range was of 5 to 7 years, Sierra. Let's start there. If I'm reading this correct, and we're talking 50 months, and I'm waiting we have another update coming in. I'm just waiting to see what it is. But right now, it appears that Sean Combs has officially been sentenced to 50 months of incarceration, so 4 years in prison. You talk about time served, right, about a year. Are we talking now then 3 years, right, Sierra?
4 years,
yeah,
2 months, guys.
3 more years based on the 1 year that he has already served. And I guess, I mean, it is a win for P. Diddy, and that the government asked for 11. You know, the recommendation was 5 to 7, which a lot of us guessed would happen. I mean, yes, he wanted to be out today. That was his goal. The defense, of course, wanting the 14 months. But 3 years compared to the 11 that the judge says, yeah, that's warranted. I mean, there's a huge difference in the range there, more than a decade versus less than half of a decade. We've got another update, Jesse, back to you.
Yep. Serena, Sean Combs was sentenced to 50 months of incarceration by Judge Subramanian, so a little over 4 years. That minus the 14 months already served. Is that the appropriate sentence, Serena?
Well, I'm sure Diddy is not thrilled to not walk out today, but he should be pretty happy
than
with
what
his
he was
defense
facing.
team, because I think the judge giving less than half of the prosecutor's recommendation and also less than what the pre-sentence report had said is a win for him. I do believe that 4 years is a win in this particular case.
Joe, what did it? Was it his letter? Was it the letters of family? Was it the children speaking? Was it the work that he's doing behind bars? Was it the nature of these charges? You know, as much as we say that, look, the judge was not convinced to throw out the charges, right? The defense put forward that motion saying transportation to engage in prostitution should be thrown out. This is not prostitution. It's protected by the First Amendment. The judge didn't buy it. But the argument, hey, he wasn't convicted of racketeering. He wasn't convicted of sex trafficking, just the prostitution charges.
What's up, Yaya?
Can't create a disparity based on other defendants who are sentenced. Maybe 4 years is appropriate and won't be overturned on appeal.
Yeah, I mean, I think he had to position this a certain way. And there's a couple things to figure in. First of all, we got to go back to the fact that the defense did an enormous job in getting him off of the most serious charges, right? So we're talking about something that's going to be smaller and it's going to be less time anyway. Next, there's a probation department recommendation, right, which put things at a certain place. And it sounds like even though the judge talked about how 11 years wouldn't have necessarily been unreasonable, and he said 14 months would have been entirely unreasonable
Diddy gets 4 years, guys.
I'm hearing it correctly. He still is in line in that he doesn't want to do something that'll necessarily be appealable, and he wants to arrive somewhere not too far afield from the recommendations themselves. And so, again, here's Diddy in a situation where he did a lot better than he might have. And, you know, that 3 years is going to go by in no time. And the day that he was found guilty of most of everything, it ensured that he would have a date that he would get home at some point anyway. So he will get home. He's better off than he may have been, than a lot of people would have been, even though he's not coming home today.
Serena, does he serve the full 3 years, or does he serve 85%?
So
In other words,
basically, it's
would he
3
serve
years,
2.5
guys,
years?
because he already been in there for
So
a year.
there is opportunity for him to get out earlier on good behavior, and so the calculation is not exact. And time will tell whether he will be getting out with
basically,
some
Diddy gets
time
3
off
years.
from the full 3. I know it's a 4-year sentence. Obviously, the 14 months counts. You already deduct that. I mean, that's definitely coming off because he does have credit for the time served. So already it's less than the sentence that he's getting, the 4 years. But yeah, he could very easily be walking out sooner rather than later. So the children will have their father home sooner than they
Wow.
expected. And as Joe mentioned before, he can be on his comeback tour, in no time.
Let's just, we had a poll up. What do you think Diddy's sentence will be? So 31%.
So he got 4
said less
years.
than
He
5
done
years.
served
They
a
were correct.
year. Diddy's due to come home
It's
in 3
interesting
years.
as we're processing the sentence of 4 years, time served 3, maybe 85%, so 2.5, 3 years to serve behind bars. I wonder if he's actually going to now have to serve it at the MDC because it's it's a lesser sentence than we were anticipating. I will say the court imposes a fine of $500,000, including to defray the costs of imprisonment. There is no restitution, but there is forfeiture as reflected in the order. There is a $5,000 fine under the statute and a special assessment of $200. Sierra, I go to you. This is interesting because I also wonder what the reaction is going to be outside that courthouse in a few minutes. What we're going to hear from the attorneys, what we're going to hear from supporters of Sean Combs, what we may be hearing from potential victims or people who are there opposed to Sean Combs. Are you seeing anything outside since the sentence has been read?
You know what's interesting, Jesse? After the verdict came down, you could feel it in the air. It was, intense. You could actually feel the emotion. Now that the sentence has been handed down, it seems to me like no one around us actually knows that it was handed down. I mean, it did just happen. We're probably one of the first ones to report it at all, but there's been no commotion. There's been no cheering. There's been no free Diddy,
Diddy,
in
3
support of
years,
Diddy.
guys.
There's been no
4 years
opposition
sentence,
to
been in
Diddy.
there for a
That
year.
has
He's
been
going to serve
pretty
3
interesting
years.
to me overall. I mean, as far as what we're going to hear from the attorneys, I said this about the verdict, and I'm going to say it about this too. I think it's a win for P. Diddy. I mean, the fact that he was up against this RICO charge, the racketeering conspiracy, had he been convicted of that, he could have faced essentially the rest of his life behind bars. Now he had pretty much the lowest charge that he was convicted of, this transportation to engage in prostitution. And now, based on what Serena is saying with the 4 years, and maybe he could serve less based on, good behavior, etc. I'm going to say that's a huge win for Diddy, especially when his life was in the balance. And I wonder if that's what we're going to hear. I wonder if prosecutors are going to say, we asked for the 11 years. The judge says it was warranted and that we didn't get the 11 years. And I wonder if the defense is going to say it's still too much. It's far too long getting him out with his children. We're going to appeal. I mean, so there's still a lot ahead.
All right, so hold on. We ain't, they done. We ain't done.
Interrupt. I want to let
I got plenty more for y'all. Gloria Allright speaks out after Diddy's sentencing.
A number of alleged victims of Sean Diddy Combs. I have 2 civil lawsuits against him from our clients who allege that he sexually assaulted them. And also I represent a number of victims or alleged victims who spoke to law enforcement, the prosecutors, but the court did not allow many of the witnesses who were willing to testify, probably because of judicial economy, because the trial was been very long. I don't know. 148 months is what.
Make sure you're subscribing to the channel if you're new, guys. Diddy gets 4 years. This is Gloria Allright.
To the 11 years that the prosecutor wanted, and nor did he do the 14 months that the defense wanted. So Mr. Combs will be in prison for a while. He basically had a lot of good things to say, the judge did, about Mr. Combs and his contribution to the community over many years. and to racial justice. But on the other hand, he has to pay the price for what he did. He could have had 10 years for each of the 2 counts of the violation of the Mann Act, which is going across state lines for the purpose of prostitution. So I think all in all, he gave the sentence that was recommended by the probation office. And so that's somewhere in between what the prosecution wanted and what the defense wanted. So,
Thank you, Bliss.
Except that there will be appeal, of course, by Mr. Combs' very large legal team. And so we'll see what happens on appeal. Yeah, the argument was by the defense that that really this was just watching sex, and so that's free speech. But the judge did not agree to that argument. It wasn't about filming. He said you can't launder an illegal act into a constitutional right, because that would otherwise be a very narrow interpretation of the Mann Act. So it was about committing a crime, because he pointed out that Mr. Combs had in fact participated and sometimes had sexual interaction with Jane and also with Cassie. So it wasn't just about watching.
Thank you.
Participated in it. So
can we get the likes up, guys? We got Gloria, whatever her name is, live reaction, guys. Double tap that screen, get the likes up. Make sure you're subscribing to the channel if you are new. Diddy sentenced to 4 years and 2 months, where he's already served a year of that, guys. So Diddy will be out in 3 years, guys.
I think he's got a good argument, and I don't think that the defense has a good argument on appeal. So he could have gotten 20 years, 10 years consecutively for each count, but now he has 148 months for a sentence. Many of my clients were very concerned that he might walk free by the end of this year, time served, and then a couple more months. And they were very much afraid that he would retaliate against them. And so I think that they will be happy that he will be at least in prison for a number of years. I think they'll feel comforted on that. So thank you.
Thank you, Belinda. All right, so that was Gloria and what she had to say regarding Diddy's sentence, man. A lot of mixed emotions on the time that he got, y'all. 4 years, 2 months in jail, man. It's crazy, y'all. It's crazy.
This is accountability. This is deterrence. This is protecting the public. And this is what the verdict is going to be today. And when people remember Sean Diddy Combs, they know that he is a convicted felon sentenced to 50 months for his actions throughout a decade on women.
And Aaron, this verdict today follows a 2-month trial, emotional, at times graphic testimony. We saw more of that play out today, at least the emotional part. But we can't forget the victims that were part of this, and there was some other color that played out in the courtroom today. Just walk us through some of the other things that we heard and what you saw.
It was a dramatic sentencing hearing, atypical of what we usually see here in federal court in Lower Manhattan, with the defense presentation lasted for hours. The defense called no witnesses during trial, but his attorneys, 5 of them, effectively acted as character witnesses for Sean Combs, talking about his achievements, how he's influenced them in the community. But the judge said that a lifetime of good works cannot erase his other conduct, and federal prosecutors urged the judge to look at the Cassie video, to consider the violence he inflicted that they said was life-altering for women. Sean Combs himself grew tearful as he turned to his children to apologize for his conduct. He told his mother, "You raised me better." And his children crowded around a microphone at one point, 6 of them, each pleading the judge for his immediate release. His daughters sobbing through their presentation to the judge, begging him to give their father a second chance to return him to the family. But you heard the judge say there was a need for deterrence, a need to show victims of domestic violence that their accounts will be taken seriously. That's why he said he imposed a 4-year sentence on Sean Combs. He also did something else, Whit. He added a $500,000 fine. That's the largest amount allowed by the law. But the judge again said it was part of the sum total of Combs's conduct. That's why he deserved it.
And Aaron, I just want to talk a little bit more about the atmosphere around the courtroom. We were looking at images of Combs' children coming in and out of the courthouse, also some helicopter pictures overhead of the crowds that have gathered there. I know throughout the 2-month trial, you saw plenty of crowds out there every single day as this played out.
Do y'all
Talk
think
more
that's
about
fair? 4 years,
the
guys.
cultural impact here, because as a rap mogul, he touched so many different people in different ways. And the judge actually referenced that today when he was speaking to Combs.
He did win, and he knows the cultural impact of Sean Combs, his pop culture icon status, his celebrity, but he also knows what Sean Combs did. And though he was not convicted of crimes of violence, federal prosecutors convinced him that violence was part of his repertoire, repeatedly inflicting it on people like Cassie Ventura, on people like Jane, the pseudonym for another one of his girlfriends who testified here. There are hundreds of people who are out here in Lower Manhattan in front of the courtroom, many of them supporters who were hoping that they would see Sean Combs walk out of those golden doors of the courthouse a free man headed home to Miami, as he said he wanted to go to care for his children and his mother. Many others, detractors, who say that Sean Combs deserved to spend time behind bars because they, like the judge, could not be blind to the very conduct that they saw on that video from 2016 in the Los Angeles hotel, Combs attacking.
The sentence is 4 years, 2 months. He already served 1 year of that already.
Cassie, when the sentence was handed down by the judge, Whit, Combs was sitting on his hands, expressionless.
And we know that Combs also submitted a letter to the judge the night before saying that he apologized. He's sincerely sorry for all of the hurt and the pain that I have caused others by my conduct. I take full responsibility and accountability for my past wrongs. Let's go back to Brian Buckmeyer, because Brian, we also know that there are a number of civil cases against Combs. Talk to us about the next steps, not only for Combs and how it relates to his time behind bars, but how these civil cases could play out.
Yeah, so for the civil cases, for the most part, I know that when Sean Combs was sentenced, the verdict came down in this case, there were some 60 civil cases that were paused, because for the most part, when you are facing both criminal and civil cases, you pause a civil because you make the argument that any testimony you give in a civil case could be used against you in a criminal case. That's no longer the issue. So those cases will now be unpaused and they'll proceed as they would have without this criminal case. But from a criminal standpoint, what I'd imagine is the defense are going to file their motions of appeal, making whatever kind of arguments in terms of what the judge did or did not consider to come to this number. But for Sean Combs, he's going back to the Metropolitan Detention Center, or MDC, and he'll probably stay there for the coming weeks. I know these defense attorneys and the Southern District of New York, what typically happens is you're either going to be put in somewhere in Pennsylvania, upstate New York, or New Jersey. But if you do have family, and we saw a lot of mention of his mother who had surgery, she's 83 years old, I would imagine that Sean Combs would make a request to be somewhere close to his family, close to his mother, maybe close to his younger children, so that they can visit him frequently. There's going to be a push to try to have him in the best facility and probably the lowest level of security, a light or low level. And we saw mentions of that during the sentencing, that they didn't want certain facts to come in because they didn't want him in a maximum or even medium security prison. So those will be some of the next steps, both criminal and civil.
And Bernarda, from the prosecution's perspective here, obviously they didn't get the conviction on the more serious charges of racketeering and such that they initially went for. And then here they were asking for 11 years in prison. They get 4. How is the prosecution looking at this? And And does this verdict send a message to sexual assault suspects?
Yeah, so when you're looking from the prosecution perspective, the prosecution is questioning, is this justice? For those victims, is this justice, this type of sentence, or even the conviction being that Sean Combs was acquitted of the racketeering conspiracy and the sex trafficking? You got to think that the prosecutor stands as the voice of the voiceless, the voice of those victims. And while they're not happy that they only got the conviction on the transportation to engage in prostitution, they still serve that as that voice today when they represented the government and the people of the United States inside of that courtrum. So what message does it send that 50 months, that time of sentence? I think the strongest message is the words that came out of Judge Subramanian's mouth, where he said and talked about these victims, how they were manipulated by Sean Combs, that they deserve a voice, that accountability is expected in this case, and that he will hand out accountability. It's not the 11 years that the prosecution sought, but still is an accountability in the sense that no matter how much money you have, you will still be held accountable in a court of law and will be sentenced according to the guidelines, or below the guidelines in this case.
And Aaron Katersky, the judge, we talked about how the judge had a message to Combs. He did reference the cultural impact that he has had. Also, Combs as an entrepreneur. He referenced what he had done for his community and talking to people. What more did the judge say?
The judge told Sean Combs that his contributions to society were incalculable. And he also said to Combs, quoting here, "Mr. Combs, I know you feel you are in a dark place right now, but these crimes were serious ones." And the judge went on to say to Combs that you and your family are going to get through this. There is light at the end of the tunnel. The judge clearly wanted to express to Combs and his family that he heard their pleas for mercy, their pleas for his immediate release. He said he couldn't do it, but he said there will be time at the end of the term of incarceration where he could make the kinds of contributions to society that Combs swore and others swore on his behalf that he wanted to make. And wait, if you'll indulge me, I just got a message from Cassie Ventura's attorney, Doug Wigdor, who says that while nothing can undo the trauma caused by Combs, the sentence imposed today recognizes the impact of the serious offenses he committed. We are confident that with the support of her family and friends, Ms. Ventura will continue healing, knowing that her bravery and fortitude have been an inspiration to so many. An immediate reaction from the attorney for Cassie Ventura, Doug Wigdor. She had written to the judge expressing fear of the hold and sway that she believed Combs still had on her life, with telling the judge that she feared that if he were immediately released, he would immediately go after her and her family after her painstaking testimony over 4 days of trial.
Yes, expressing that fear of retribution if he were to be set free. Brian Buckmeyer, if you could expand more on the impact on culture and music, and is it possible for somebody like Combs to make a comeback after he's released from prison?
You know, with most people, I would say no. But as I've followed this case, and even in the podcast that we've done here at ABC, Bad Rap, the case against Diddy, if there was ever a person who had the ability to reinvent themselves over the years and change public perception of themselves, it would be Sean Combs. And so I think the judge said it best. A lifetime of success in helping people are not going to wash away the horrible acts that we saw. The video of Sean Combs brutally assaulting Cassie in that hotel video will forever be a part of his legacy, whatever it may be. I think in terms of what he did, in terms of bringing a genre of music as well as a cultural sensation towards rap and hip hop and R&B, the people that he has brought to the forefront of the music, as well as business acumen, the people who spoke on his behalf, I think they spoke truthfully about who he was. But this was very much a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, that there was almost two sides to this man, that at least I saw someone who has followed his music from a childhood and also watching this trial. I think the question about what happens now in terms of his impact is, how does he change from this?
Top story of the night,
Are the
Sean,
words that we saw that he put down on that letter for the judge and that he spoke in court?
Let's pause this. Let's hear how Diddy reacted when he heard the sentence, guys.
Combs has been sentenced to more than 4 years in prison.
Brenda.
Over the summer, the music mogul had been found guilty on prostitution-related charges. CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman was in the courtroom today in Manhattan and joins us now. Katrina, thanks for being with us here tonight. Going into today, there was the potential Combs could have even been out within weeks. So how did he react when he heard that sentence?
You know, Nancy, what was notable was how little reaction there was. He looked down at his hands, they were clasped in his lap, and he just looked defeated. The same with his family. It was very quiet in that courtroom, very solemn.
You could have heard a pin drop.
A drastic difference from earlier because this day stretched on for a really long time. Many people spoke in court, his attorneys, and most notably his children. That was extremely emotional. They were crying. They were talking about how much they respect their father and how hard it has been for them to not have him around, especially his children who lost their mother, Kim Porter. His lawyer, Nicole Westmoreland, also broke down crying when she talked about Sean Combs. She said that he had changed her life. And then Sean Combs himself got up and spoke in court. And he said that what's been really hard for him during this trial is having to be silent, not being able to speak on his own behalf. He said that his actions were disgusting, they were shameful, and they were sick. He said that he's not a larger-than-life person. He is a human being, and that he got lost in the excess, in the ego. His voice was shaking. He was crying today. I saw him wiping tears from his face in court. And he ultimately said that he is humbled and he's broken. He said, "I hate myself right now," before the judge and before this sentence came down.
So, Katrina, prosecutors, though, they had wanted this sentence to be 11 years. What did the judge say when they actually handed this down?
So, ultimately, the judge decided to give him this sentence of 50 months incarceration, 5 years of supervised release. And this is actually lower, it's significantly lower than what the prosecution wanted. That was about 11 years. And then the probationary recommendation was 7 years. Now, Sean Combs' team, they wanted only up to 14 months. So he did end up getting significantly more than that. What the judge said, though, is he began when he delivered this sentence by very warmly talking about all that Sean Combs has accomplished, the things that we heard today, how devoted he is to his family, how he broke barriers as a Black man, his entrepreneurship. But then there was this shift in tone, and he got very serious, and he ultimately said that there was just an overwhelming amount of evidence in this case. The actions that Sean Combs took against his ex-girlfriends, Cassie Ventura and a woman who went by Jane, who testified in this courtroom, the violence, the psychological and physical abuse against them. And he said that he had to give a significant sentence for the purpose of deterrence and because he believes that Sean Combs still could potentially pose a danger. He thinks that he needs more time in prison, but said that he will ultimately get his life back on the other side of this.
Katrina Kaufman, thank you for your reporting throughout this process. We appreciate it. And you can watch CBS News' 1 hour special, Sean Diddy Combs, the sentencing, right here on CBS News 24/7. That'll be tonight at 9 p.m. and 11.
They said it was so silent in the courtroom, you could have heard a pin drop.
Truthful, or were they just words in order to evade a greater sentence? I don't know. And I think we're going to have to wait and see what this term of incarceration holds for him, and especially what happens when he's released.
And Bernarda, I also want to get your take on what this potentially means for victims moving forward and feeling empowered to speak. Because we know that one of the witnesses who was actually supposed to read a victim impact statement today bowed out before sentencing occurred.
Which was Mia,
and then
guys.
we heard from Cassie Ventura there in that statement, her concern for retribution. I just wonder your final thoughts on what you think that this could mean for victims going forward.
Well, it depends. I mean, for most victims, you can see it this way in the sense of that you had a government, you had a prosecutor's office that was willing to go toe-to-toe with a man as powerful as Sean Diddy Combs, who once had the key to the city, and was willing to back up these victims and believed in these victims and what happened to them and was willing to do the fight. But then on the flip side, you can say, well...
Oh, man. Hold on, y'all.
what this story says, what the judge says, is what seals this case in the sense that victims were heard with this sentence.
Bernarda, thank you. Aaron Katursky, we've been talking about the verdict a lot, but just give us a sense of the logistics now. Where does Sean Diddy Combs go from here, and what's the next 24 hours like?
The first thing Sean Combs did at the conclusion of court was to pause, to turn toward his family, still seated in the gallery, and look at them as if to say it's going to be okay. I was here at an earlier court hearing last week when Combs was given the opportunity to speak directly to his family after everyone else had cleared out. He told them, whatever happens, it's going to be okay. He will deal with it. This is not the sentence he wanted, but it may have been the one he was expecting with.
Aaron Katursky and the entire team, thanks so much. Once again, Sean Diddy Combs has been sentenced to 50 months for his 2 convictions on prostitution-related offenses, about 4 years. He'll also get that credit for time served. We're going to return you to regular programming. Our coverage will continue on our streaming channel, ABC News Live and abcnews.com. Then we'll have the very latest and a full wrap-up on World News Tonight. I'm Whit Johnson. Have a great day.
News Live, music mogul Sean Diddy Combs has been sentenced to 4 years in prison on 2 counts of transportation for the purpose of prostitution. So far, he's already spent 12 months behind bars at a Brooklyn detention center, time that will be factored into his sentence. After Combs made his final plea to the court, the presiding judge over the case said, quote, "A history of good works cannot wash away the record in this case." For more now, ABC News' Rena Roy is outside that courthouse, and ABC News legal contributor and criminal defense attorney Bernarda Villalona both join us. Rena, before Combs was sentenced, he actually apologized to Cassie and another victim who testified against him using a pseudonym named Jane. What has been the reaction outside to this sentence?
Well, Rhiannon, I can tell you that Cassie Ventura's attorney just released a statement on behalf of her just a couple of moments ago, and I'll read it here. While nothing can undo the trauma caused by Combs, the sentence imposed today recognizes the impact of the serious offenses he committed. We are confident that with the support of her family and friends, Ms. Ventura will continue healing, knowing that her bravery and fortitude have been an inspiration to so many. And we know from our teams that were inside the courtroom as the sentencing was handed down. Combs sat there expressionless with his hands clasped. Moments later, he turned to his family sitting in the gallery, his 7 children and his mother, to look at them momentarily before he's taken away. And this sentence, as we know, is much more than the defense team had been asking for. They wanted time served, essentially, 14 months. So he would have gone home potentially by the end of the year. And it's much less, as we know, than the prosecution had asked for. They had been asking for more.
Cuz, Gillian, you got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them.
This amount of time, because he wanted to send a message that violence against women is not acceptable. And these women, their stories need to be listened to, Rhiannon.
Rena, thank you. Let's bring in ABC News Chief Investigative Correspondent Aaron Katursky. Aaron has been following this case since the very beginning. We just heard that statement from Cassie Ventura. Aaron, what else are you hearing? What was the reaction from Diddy and his family who were in the courtroom when this came down?
I know, but it's okay.
Sean Combs sat on his hands expressionless as the sentence was imposed by Judge Arun Subramanian. And when it was over and the courtroom was starting to clear out, Combs turned toward his family. He said, "I'm sorry and I love you." And that was a message that Combs had said in his allocution to the court. He turned from the judge of whom he asked mercy and turned toward his family seated in the gallery, Rhiannon, telling them that I'm sorry, mentioning his children, each of them by name. And he began to cry as he told his mother, "You raised me better. You taught me better." Combs did not want this sentence. He was hoping to walk out today with time served, but this may have been the sentence he was expecting, as he had previously told his family, whatever happens, I'll deal with it. And some of his attorneys had been prepared for an incarceratory sentence. Now, 4 years, he'll get credit of a year for time served, a $500,000 fine. But the judge told him there is light at the end of the tunnel, that he can eventually become the kind of person outside of prison that he says he's committed toward becoming, a harbinger harbinger for the community, somebody who will take care of his mother and his children.
I don't know why y'all come in saying what happened. All you got to do is read the screen. Did he sentenced to 4 years in jail, guys? Make sure you double tapping that screen. Get the likes up. Most definitely subscribe to the channel if you are new. We on the road to 50K. We need all the subscribers we can get. So subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. Once again, did he sentenced to 4 years, 2 months in jail, guys, with a year credit for time already served. So he's looking at 3 years, guys.
And be an example to the world.
Aaron, thank you for that. Bernarda, the prosecution wanted an 11-year sentence citing Combs' violence, but the judge called that unreasonable. And as we've mentioned, sentencing him instead to 50 months in prison, 5 years of supervised release, and that fine that Aaron just mentioned of $500,000. I want to ask first if you're surprised by this sentence.
I'm not surprised by the sentence. Well, I'll take it back. I'm surprised in the sense that the judge did not go forward with the recommendation of probation where the guidelines were 70 to 87 months. That's what I was expecting the sentence to be, given that there were so many egregious facts that were heard throughout this trial, and also that probation requested that. So in terms of what the prosecution asked for, I think the 11 years was excessive, and I was a prosecutor for 16 years, and I can tell you that it was excessive given everything that we heard. Of course, no amount of time is going to change the facts or what happened to Jane or to Cassie or to the other people that suffered under the hands of Sean Combs. However, these 50 months do send a message in the sense of deterrence, of accountability, of rehabilitation, in terms of giving a voice to the victims that they will be heard in a court of law and no one is above the law.
And Bernarda, we heard from our friend Brian Buckmeyer, another former attorney. He was mentioning that 50 months or about 4 years, of course, they'll take off the time he's already served. And then he mentioned something about he'll only serve about 85% of that. Can you break this down? Because that math means should only be in jail for maybe a little over 2 more years. Is that right?
Yeah, so when we're talking about a federal sentence and the type of crime that Sean Combs was found guilty of, yes, he was sentenced to 50 months. But when it comes to federal sentencing and that type of crime, he does 85% of the time of the sentence that he's been given. Aside from 85% of the time of the sentence, he will get credit for each and every day that he has served. Now, he's been in custody since September of 2024, so a little bit over a year. So he'll get credit for that time as well. So we're looking at, in terms of the math, we're looking about 2 more years.
2 more years, guys.
Thank you so much, Bernarda and Raina Roy, for that.
Diddy might as well say he got a two-year sentence.
ABC News contributor and senior entertainment reporter Kelly Carter is joining us now to talk more about this. Kelly, what have you seen on social media? What's been the reaction so far to this sentencing?
Yeah, you know what? Doing a cursory look right after everyone got the news, everyone kind of thinks that this is another example of wealth and celebrity, maybe minimizing what maybe your average civilian might have gotten, you know, if they found themselves staying in court. I think people expected him to get a longer sentencing, and that seems to be what, you know, everyone is saying on X and on Threads and on Facebook when I just took that cursory look right in the aftermath of that sentencing coming down.
And we know Diddy has come back from scandals in the past. He's really built, this before this whole trial and all these accusations. He was such an icon of hip hop. He did so much for the Black community. What do you think lies ahead for his business empire after this?
I mean, you know, let's see. Sean Combs, and certainly not to make light of anything that he's been stood accused of, has been the king of the remix. You know, as you said, like he's been able to somehow recreate himself over the years. And I don't know that this is going to be one of those opportunities. I think that there probably are a lot of people that he used to do business with that may not feel comfortable working with him in the future. And, you know, one thing that he said today is that he really wants to be an example. He wants to get a second chance, and he wants to, you know, do talks and talk to people. And so maybe that's what his next chapter.
Gillian say he'll serve 2.5 years. Well, he gonna be right up out that thing here real soon. I know people are shocked.
Let's continue his business empire without him at the forefront. Could that be a possibility?
I mean, you know, it remains to be seen. We know at least one of his sons obviously released music towards the tail end of the trial and, you know, seems to have a foothold in that world. But he also was someone who worked in the world of fashion and spirits and so on and so on. So let's see who might step up and kind of take the lead if that's what is going to happen.
Have they stayed out of the limelight for the most part, the family, or what do you think where did they go from here?
You know, I feel like they're going to be advocates for trying to, get him out. They're going to be part of his redemption story, I think, and probably trying to keep that legacy alive, or at least try and focus on some of the positives and all of the things that he did to the community, these accusations aside.
Kelly Carter, thank you so much for breaking down that aspect for us. And back to the other breaking news this hour. It has been a busy day here. Hamas has agreed in principle to a...
We ain't talking about Hamas. Let's go here. Reaction outside the courthouse.
Thank you for joining us. This is AP News, live stream of the Sean Diddy Combs sentencing. 4 years and 2 months is
much worse. He could have done what the prosecution was asking for, 11 years. That's a long time. And he came in under the PSR. So even though it's a disappointment to the defense, I think it's a reasonable place to end up.
Do you think that the fact that it came under that level means that the victims will feel like justice was served, or do you think that they will be left hoping or wanting more?
You know, you have a good decision when everybody is upset. I do think the victims will probably wish it had been a greater sentence. But of course, the defense and the defense's family, I do think they wish that it had been much less. So
let's get the lights up past 200, guys, as we check out some of these live reactions outside the courthouse. You know, when Diddy got his sentence, guys, of 4 years and 2 months. Let's get the lights up past 200. 50 more, y'all. Click those 3 dots, hit that thumbs up, and most definitely subscribe to the channel if you're new. How did you feel about the time that Diddy got? Was it a slap on the wrist, or was it just?
The words the judge said, I think, were powerful and will have an impact on the victims. And I think that's why he did that. I think he's trying to say to both sides, look, this was not easy. And as far as the victims are concerned, you are brave women. He said that you have enabled other women to come up and to state what happened to them behind closed doors. So he spoke to them personally. He called them by name. Even if they may not agree with the sentence, he made sure that he told them how he felt and how important it was that they came forward.
So Diddy still faces dozens of civil lawsuits. This is not the last time we'll see him in court. Can you explain a little bit about what those civil suits are about? And in your opinion, do you think that the sentencing today will have any bearing on those suits?
So he does face dozens of lawsuits, and that was mentioned by the defense. One of the things that the defense was trying to argue is, you don't have to give him more time, Your Honor, because all of these other things have deterred him. He is not going to do this again. He's facing civil suits. He's facing loss of his businesses. But the civil suits, I believe, are going to go forward. I think he's behind bars now for quite some time. They are trying to say that they need some damages paid to them because they've been harmed. One of the civil suits is by Deontay Nash, who was one of the stylists, I believe, who was involved. And, he's stating that he was in an altercation and that Combs was abusive to him. And so he's asking for money damages. The judge did state that Combs has to pay $500,000, and that's no small amount. That was the fine. So whatever he's already spent on defense fees, he now has to pay a fine.
That is a small $500,000 to Diddy. He got that plus more. He ain't tripping on no $500,000.
Or if he determines a settlement is in order, he'll have to pay that. So I think all in all, he has faced both civil and criminal ramifications from his actions. He actually spoke today. He was the last person to speak. And he said, I have reached the lowest low. I am remorseful. Despite what the government says, I am very sorry and I take full accountability for my actions. And he mentioned he's lost everything. He's lost time with his family. He's lost his businesses. So I do think that the impact of everything, including the civil suits against him, has taken its toll.
So, do you think that the outcome, the ultimate outcome of this case, will also have a bearing on whether similar cases in the future are brought by prosecutors if prosecutors decide to prosecute rather than settle, for example. Do you think this is encouraging for future prosecutors? Do you think it's discouraging? How do you view things going forward in similar cases?
I think prosecutors in the future are going to think about the type of charges they bring. So, for instance, they brought the RICO conspiracy. The jury said no and acquitted him on that charge. They brought a charge for sex trafficking. The jury said no. There was no force, fraud, and coercion as far as sex trafficking is concerned. So I think the prosecutors in the Southern District are going to think twice before they bring those types of charges. The Mann Act, the jury said yes, you are guilty on 2 counts as it relates to Jane, as it relates to Cassie. And I believe that in the future, not only will prosecutors think about what charges should they bring, but I think, and the judge mentioned this, people are going...
Yeah, he got 4 years only. 4 years, 2 months. He already been locked up for a year. He's going to have to probably do like 2.5 years, guys, and Diddy will be right up out of there.
A significant punishment, and to the judge, the 4.2, the 50 months is a significant punishment.
All right, well, thank you so much, Terry Austin. That was attorney and legal analyst Terry Austin. Thanks so much for sharing your insights and what you observed in the courtroom today.
Thank you.
It's crazy, y'all. Oh, Diddy has made a lot of people mad, man. With this sentence, guys, I know there's a lot of people in their fifis, man. A lot of people. There go his kids and family leaving the courthouse after he was sentenced, guys. It's crazy. It's crazy, y'all. How do y'all feel about that? I hear him out there saying, your daddy got 4 years. Yeah, that's all he got. 4 years and 2 months. With a year already served, guys.
Of alleged victims of Sean Diddy Combs, I have 2 civil lawsuits against him from my clients who allege that he sexually assaulted them. And also I represent a number of victims or alleged victims who spoke to law enforcement, the prosecutors, but the court...
Gloria All Right's reaction to the sentencing. Once again, for y'all that missed it.
Willing to testify, probably because of judicial economy, because the trial would have been very...
Oh my God.
Long. I don't know. 148 months is what the sentence was. I think the judge was very thoughtful. He didn't do the 11 years.
They said 50 months, but she said they said 148. See, I also seen somewhere where they said that Diddy was sentenced to 5 years? No, to 4 years incarceration and 5 years probated. But I don't know how true that is because everybody keeps on saying 4 years, 2 months, and they don't even make mention of the other 5 years.
Mr. Combs and his contribution to the community over many years and to racial justice. But on the other hand, he has to pay the price for what he did. He could have had 10 years for each of the 2 counts of the violation of the Mann Act, which is going across state lines for the purpose of prostitution. So I think all in all, he gave the sentence that was recommended by the probation office. And so that's somewhere in between what the prosecution wanted and what the defense wanted. So it's finally over, except that there will be appeal, of course, by Mr. Combs, a very large legal team, and so we'll see what happens on appeal. Yeah, the argument was by the defense that that really this was just watching sex, and so that's free speech. But the judge did not agree to that argument. It wasn't about filming. He said you can't launder an illegal act into a constitutional right, because that would otherwise be a very narrow interpretation of the Mann Act. So it was about committing a crime, because he pointed out that Mr. Combs had in fact participated and sometimes had sexual interaction with Jane and also with Cassie. So it wasn't just about watching, he actually participated in it. So I think he's got a good argument, and I don't think that the defense has a good argument on appeal. So he could have gotten 20 years, 10 years consecutively for each count, but now he has 148 months for a sentence. Many of my clients were very concerned that he might walk free by the end of this year, time served, and then a couple more months. And they were very much afraid that he would retaliate against them. And so I think that they will be happy that he will be at least in prison for a number of years. I think they'll feel comforted on that. So thank you. Okay, all right.
Gloria, all right.
It wasn't the 11 years that the prosecution wanted, nor was it the 14 months and get out by the end of this year that the defense wanted. He did have very kind words for Mr. Combs in reference to his contribution to racial justice and the community. But on the other hand, it's obvious that Mr. Combs is going to have to pay the price, the consequences for his two criminal acts. He could have had 10 years for each count in the Mann Act. That would have been 20 years. So he only has 148 months that he is ordered to serve. No doubt his legal team will be appealing from this sentence and from the trial as soon as possible. He's got a very large legal team because that's sufficient funds, and so he'll be able to do that.
He got to do 85%. He'll be out in about 2.5 years, guys.
We're very afraid that he would get
on his 5-year sentence. He'll be out in 2.5 years.
Retaliate against them. That's something that Cassie Ventura said, but it's also something that my clients were concerned about. So I think they'll be comforted by the fact that he will have to serve now a number of years, and that they won't have to worry about his getting out. I'm not saying he would retaliate against them, but he argued today, the defense, that he is a different man today, now that he's no longer on drugs. That may be true, but he still has to pay the consequences of what he did when he was addicted.
Now, Gloria, when you was judge, when you talked to her, what was some of the
It's crazy, y'all. Well, I know he got less time than he probably thought he was going to get. Could have been enough for 20 years, 11 years, but he wound up getting out in getting 4.5, man, to where he could be out in 2.5 years, man. There's Janice. That lady, I think they said that lady 80 years old, man. She looked good for her age.
Love you too. Thank you.
Did his mom.
I will. Thank you so much. We love you, Mama. We love you, Mama.
Coach, how do you feel? I'm a Coach, how you feeling?
Diddy gonna get out and be like, man, don't believe half of the stuff that y'all heard. Them people was lying on me. Watch what I tell y'all. When he get out, he gonna tell y'all all that stuff about him being in the room, rubbing man juice on his nipples. He gonna say they lying on him. Watch what I tell you. He gonna say, man, don't believe half of the stuff you heard. Them people was just lying on me. He gonna make a song about it. Watch.
No, yeah, you're all good. Be careful.
I'm telling y'all, y'all probably think I'm lying. Diddy gonna come up out of jail. He gonna do a song. You know what I'm saying? He gonna go talk. He gonna do interviews, and he gonna be telling you all that disgusting stuff that y'all heard about him. Watch him say that they was lying on him. He gonna be like, man, they was lying on me. They was just trying to make me look bad. They, you know, I couldn't really just say much. We in court, but they was lying on me, man. I'm telling you, they would watch. Watch what I tell y'all. Think I'm capping. I'm telling y'all.
Maybe, I mean, this also took a lot longer than you expected. 6.5 hours. 6.5 hours. Yeah, so you could talk a little bit about why it took longer than you expected. And then I was going to ask a little bit about sort of just what it means for cases like this in the future, if it sort of is going to embolden prosecutors to take up more cases like this or deter them, or sort of what your view is on that.
Okay.
And then also to talk a little bit about Diddy and his legacy and culture in the hip hop world, if what this means and sort of how the public is going to view him from here on out. Yeah. Yeah. So pretty free form though too. I'm just like here to prompt you and whatever.
Who protecting Diddy? I ain't protecting no Diddy. I ain't protecting nobody. I'm just telling y'all what he gonna get out and say when he get out. Now understand that he's not gonna be in a maximum security prison to where he has to worry about, inmates attacking him. With this 2.5-year sentence, don't be surprised if he don't go to protective custody where they won't have access to him. He's gonna get out here in about 2.5 years. And all I'm saying is he's gonna do interviews. Watch what I tell you. He's gonna do interviews where he says that these people who got up here and said these nasty things about him in court was lying on him. Watch what I tell you. I'm not taking up for nobody. I'm just telling you how I feel about what he's gonna do when he get out. Because he most definitely gonna do it. You can believe that. And when it comes to all these other things y'all talking about with these cases, they're only money. They just want money out of Diddy. They ain't trying to get Diddy locked up. They just want Diddy to pay him some money. So it's a big difference in between what he just went through and what he faces to go through next, basically having to shell out more money.
Said to the judge, hey, we know you may think that you want to split the decision, or I would say how they worded it. Essentially, they said that they thought the judge was going to go between the two, what the prosecution recommended and what the defense was recommending, which was 14 months to 11 years. Now, immediately the judge responded to the 11 years that the prosecution was pushing for and said that is more than necessary. So he said 11 years is not what I'm going to give him, but I do want to drive home the seriousness of this case. And as he was talking, then I started thinking, well, maybe he's going to go towards the higher end, maybe give him 6-7 years, just because he kept reiterating the impact of his abuse, the impact of the violence. He was advocating for Cassie and Jane and talking about how brave it was for them to testify And he said, you know, it really impacted him, the judge himself, listening to their testimony to see that, you know, this didn't go on for a year or two. This was decades of abuse, decades of violence, decades of coercion. And so when the judge handed down 50 months, I thought,
I ain't gonna lie to you, Rudy. I don't see anything happening to Diddy past what's done happened to him already. Ain't nobody finna have their way with Diddy. Diddy gonna be in PC, and ain't nobody gonna be able to touch him until he get up out of there. How much you wanna bet? Why you talking about, oh, they'll still have their way with him in PC? Man, they ain't looking for Diddy like that. They is not looking for Diddy like that in jail. You gotta think, he been in the county for the longest. If they wanted to get to him, really get to him, they could already got to him. Diddy is gonna go into protective custody, in my opinion, and they're gonna protect Diddy until Diddy gets out. What are we talking about?
They gave him the excitement of him getting 3 not guilty verdicts. Obviously, they didn't know what was going to happen down the line, but it was already a feat that they passed through. Or basically, what do I want to say? It was an achievement in itself that he was acquitted of 3 of the serious charges, and so there was a lot of excitement, there was a standing ovation, there was hugging, kissing, crying going on, and so I didn't know what to expect when the sentence was going to be handed down. And Diddy sat there looking at the judge, had his hands in his lap, didn't move. He's usually fidgety.
Yeah, just like somebody just said, you gotta understand, Diddy ain't your normal inmate. You know what I'm saying? Diddy is a $1 billion person. The most serious charges they drop, he's in there for basically, you know, paying some prostitutes. You know, ain't nobody looking for Diddy like that inside of jail. If anything, he's gonna be like one of the, what can I say? They don't even want to put Diddy with regular inmates. He gonna have his way in jail. He got too much money. You know, he got way too much money, man. Just, man, come on, man. He ain't, man, they ain't finna do nothing to Diddy off in there. I'm not protecting Diddy. I'm not saying Diddy is innocent or none of that. What I'm saying is, Diddy ain't your typical inmate. Diddy is a $1 billion businessman. You know what I'm saying? So if you have to take care of some people in prison just to make sure that he's good while he's in prison, what make you think he won't do that? He got enough money to do that. You know, I'm just saying, you can let me know what you think. But when it comes to Diddy being harmed in jail, I don't see it happening.
And he had the legal team, he has the resources, the wealth to be able to take on the government. And then when he got the 3 not guilty verdicts and was acquitted of the serious crimes, a lot of people were saying he beat the government. There was even, I believe Mark Agnifilo, lead attorney, said when he went back to the jail, they gave him a standing ovation saying, nobody beats the government and you beat the government. Today, I don't think that's the case, but I will reference Cassie's letter, for example, the victim impact statement that she submitted to the court. And she said the outcome of this case, the acquittal of the serious charges, proved that victims are not safe, that and victims are not safe to come forward to tell their stories. And that was largely the narrative that was coming out of the Diddy verdict, right? That he beat the government, that this is why victims don't come forward, they're not protected. Mia, who was testifying under that pseudonym, who was a former employee of his, who also testified to the abuse and the forced labor allegations, she also had her identity exposed. And so she too kind of echoed what Cassie was saying of, you know, victims come forward and they're not protected. But I think the judge was trying to correct that today. He said that he wanted to send a message to victims that we hear you and we will hold abusers accountable. And I think,
let's talk about it. Ballin say, man, he already got people on payroll in there. Exactly, Ballin. Y'all don't remember the reports that came out that said that he had the inmates in there doing his laundry, cleaning up his cell? Yeah, Diddy ain't your typical inmate, man. You know what I'm saying? I'm just being real with y'all. See, a lot of people go to jail, have no money, have a whole bunch of enemies, things of that nature. Diddy go to jail as a billionaire. You know, offer them inmates a little money, pay one of the toughest one in there for protection. Diddy gonna handle that jail time like a cakewalk. You know, it's not gonna be anything where some of y'all are feeling like where it's people that's gonna be on his neck. Ain't nobody gonna be on Diddy's neck. Diddy is gonna be in there until he gets out, whether he have to pay somebody to take care of him or if he goes to protective custody, because he only gonna be in there, let's be real, for about 2.5 years.
14 months, which would be essentially time served, and he would walk out of those doors and be home before Christmas. And so I do think that the judge did overcorrect and at least tell victims and tell people who thought that this case was an example of, the Me Too movement falling short, that no, he is still going to be held accountable. And this is still a significant amount of jail time for someone who has never been held accountable. He has no record, and he has gotten away with this for over a decade.
I don't know, Gillian. I haven't decided.
Yes, I mean, on that note, could you tell us what you think a little bit about what this means for Sean Combs' legacy as a cultural figure, as a music mogul?
I seen somebody, you talking about he won't make it when he get out. People are after him. Who, Benjamin? Who is after Diddy? Before Diddy was in jail, he was free. And he got even more protection and bodyguards and all of that on the outside. Man, y'all got to stop this, man. They ain't looking to take out Diddy, man. Ain't nobody looking to take Diddy out the game, man. Diddy gonna be all right. What's gonna happen, Diddy gonna get out and probably throw some more freak-offs with some willing participants this time. Because let's be real, it's women out there that'll line up to be part of a Diddy freak-off as long as they getting paid and won't say nothing. I'm just being real.
Well, that it's possible. And that's a legacy that the defense was harping on and reiterating today in court, saying that this is a man who, showed his community what is possible, but also reached back and gave opportunities to people that don't get opportunities, particularly people of color. Now, what I think has forever changed that is the release of that hotel attack video, where we witnessed with our own two eyes the brutality, how viciously he attacked Cassie after denying all of the allegations. And I think it's really hard to come back from that. But today in court, we saw a little bit about his strategy and how he may attempt to come back from that, which is to say, I'm a broken man. I went to prison and I had to face my demons. I was a drug addict, and now I'm going to start speaking and rebrand myself as this motivational figure of, I had it all.
Let's go,
I lost.
Ballin say he's gonna throw a wild king night the moment they let him out of jail and he get home, and everybody that's with it is gonna be willing this time because they already know what they're looking to go into. Don't be surprised if he don't get out and get right back with Young Miami, guys, because let's be real. I heard people say, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, I heard people say if Diddy had a bunch of Young Miamis doing the freak-offs, he wouldn't be in jail right now. She was a willing participant in whatever was going on and still ain't told on Diddy to this day. So I look at it, when Diddy gets out, Diddy's going to throw more parties. Diddy's going to have little private freak-offs still. The difference is he won't have to force anybody to do it. They're going to be lined up to participate in a Diddy freak-off. That's just my opinion, man.
Takes the back seat. He was very active in his own defense. He even told the judge, the most frustrating part of this was being silent this whole time and not being able to speak up for myself. And so if anyone is going to attempt to come back from this, we know it is him. He is just a relentless businessman.
Yeah, and so it's, he still faces dozens of civil lawsuits, right? And so my guess is that...
Let's talk about it, just my five,
the headlines that we're going to see about Diddy are going to involve those civil lawsuits. Do you think that this sentencing has any bearing on how those...
That's all it did, Ballin, was get people ready to join up. Now they know that he into these type of activities. Oh, man. Yeah, he about to have people lined up around the corner to participate with Diddy. Let's live. Come on, y'all. We live in the real world. We live out here. We know how people act when they get around celebrities. Some people anyway. And now that the whole world know that Diddy is in on this type of thing, it's people out there that are just like Diddy, that are willing to let him do that stuff that he was doing where they felt like they was being forced to do it. They're going to let him do it without being forced, guys. I just can't do nothing but keep it real.
Is now that he is going to see the inside of a courtroom for a very long time.
Thanks very much. We were just joined by Mona Kosar Abdi. She's a senior correspondent for Extra TV. Thanks for sharing your insights and sort of your experiences from inside the courtroom.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, guys.
Surprised that it was that short a sentence, but it also reflects what victims have wanted, what the general populace wanted, which is that folks will have to have some comeuppance for enacting, crimes of this nature. I'm a little bit sort of like the general public. I don't quite know how to feel about this. In many ways, it's justice for those who've been harmed, and in other ways, not quite sure if this reflects what the necessary kind of punishment would be for such heinous crimes. But here we are.
What do you think this sentence that might be a bit shorter than what
Ballin say this time they're gonna be doing it for free.
legacy as a cultural
You ain't gonna have to pay no money.
a figure in hip hop?
In many ways, I think this reflects, once again, the fact that visible folks will have opportunities to be able to defend themselves and, be able to sort of cast their narratives in their own light and have that be reflected in sentencing. I don't think this does much to either tarnish or enhance his legacy. I think it has more implications on the criminal justice system and how folks who've been accused of certain crimes get that reflected. His legacy remains the same. He still remains an important figure in hip hop. He still remains a person who has.
Let's maneuver somewhere else, guys. Shout out to everybody in the building, man. If you're not subscribed to this channel, subscribe to the channel, man. Diddy got 4 years, 2 months, guys.
Will be sentenced to 50 months in prison. That is 50 months in prison. Far less than the 11 years requested, far more than the 14 months. He will not walk out of the door behind me in the courtroom today. He will not be a free man for 50 months. The judge says, which is a little shy of 4.25 years. This is a serious sentence that reflects the gravity of your crimes and conducts. He also said this is a hard time away from your family, but also notes that Combs will have a life after prison, after 50 months. This is demonstrating to the court the gravity of the crimes and the conduct, Casey. Here you have it. 50 months for the 2 charges, transportation for the purpose of prostitution, the Mann Act violations. They tried very hard as the defense today, Casey, to suggest that would be a high sentence given the fact that the defense says, he did not financially benefit and profit from these so-called prostitution acts. The judge rejecting it almost out of hand, sentencing the music mogul, convicted in July by a jury of his peers, to 50 months in prison.
And Lisa France, I'd like to talk to you for a second about kind of the big picture of what this means, because as we've been covering this, we saw the judge touch on, and we saw the defense talk about what Sean...
Nancy over there aggravated, Ballin. Oh, she gonna have a time with this.
To society. Obviously, during the trial, we talked quite a bit about the negative contributions that he is now being held to account for. But what is this going to mean for the millions of people who've been following this trial? What more does it say about where we are?
Well, Casey, because of the positive contributions, it's the reason why so many people feel so very strongly about this. Having seen the video, having heard the testimony, it is a huge disappointment to a lot of his fans.
She ain't reacted yet, kids, but we will go to it as soon as she drops something. She ain't reacted yet.
Restaurants and spirits. I mean, he was someone that, as they like to say, got it out the dirt, came from the hood and really elevated himself as a young man.
All right, Gillian,
went to Howard University and would jump on the train and go back to New York City and work as an intern, and worked his way up from an intern to founding his own record label. And Bad Boy Records, I mean, it was the soundtrack for so many people's youth. So when you saw what was alleged against Sean Combs, and then when you followed this trial, it was a complete and utter devastating disappointment to a lot of his fans who expected much more of him. Now, I've said this before on air, for those of us who have covered him for years, this was not a surprise, these allegations. We had heard rumors, we have heard people saying that they were afraid of him, that, he had a lifestyle that not everybody would approve of. And so I think now, hearing the verdict, there are going to be some people who absolutely continue to support him. There are still people, even having seen the video, who say that, Cassie Ventura was someone who, participated. And but also there are people who say that it's absolutely disgusting. And I thought it was interesting that Sean Combs used that word when he was referencing the videotape. He said that it was disgusting, and he appeared in his remarks to try to take ownership, to also try to sound contrite. But at the same time, to Laura's point, he was very careful about not saying anything that might cause a problem when he tries to, get back into court and get this revisited, by appealing this. So, I think that we're always going to have a split. That's always the case when you have things like this. Today is the 30th anniversary of the acquittal of O.J. Simpson. And while these are two very different cases, we're still having conversations about what it means when you have a successful, famous Black defendant in these cases. Can they really get a fair trial? Are people going to view them differently? Will he be able to have the type of life that he could have, after he gets out? And so, these conversations continue. It's very historic. And, I had plenty of people hitting me up earlier today saying, what's your over under? What do you think? Do you think he's going to be able to, maybe just get out in a couple of months? Do you think he's going to get years? I think at the end of the day, people just, some people wanted to see justice, and some people thought, much like I think Mr. Combs thought, that after he was acquitted of the more serious charges, that he was going to be walking out of that courtroom and heading back home to Miami and going back to, the lifestyle in some ways that he enjoyed before. Not the dark parts that we heard about, but absolutely the fame, the fortune, and the being a celebrity.
Yeah, well, and we're also just learning here that the judge imposed the maximum $500,000 fine against Combs here.
Then he got it. He ain't tripping.
Coates, can you help us understand from a legal point of view? Obviously, there will be a process that continues on here. Assume there will be an appeal. I mean, how much of more time do we expect based on the sentence that he'll spend in prison?
He has been serving some time in the jail, not a federal prison. It's a holding over location in anticipation of trial and, of course, of sentencing, which means that the time he has served under the auspices, of course, of the Bureau of Prisons will be applied to the sentence he has. He also can have the benefit of some sorts of federal programming for somebody who is having their first official sentence, and good time served, et cetera, good behavior, participation, in a number of programs geared at going against recidivism, a fancy legal way of saying you're not to do crimes again. That will all be factored into his overall sentence. But they talked about the resources that are going to have been available to him. That's why he has that penalty of $500,000. We're talking about a man with an empire that was worth more $500 million or more. That's a very important point, because had they convicted him on RICO, the government's hands come out. They want the money that could be associated with anything to do with a crime related to an enterprise. That went away, but he still now has this fine, and he still has civil suits to contend with. Those do not go away. They are not paused while he is in a federal prison, and they also have a lower standard than the criminal court. Remember, the criminal court, beyond a reasonable doubt. A civil suit, the preponderance of evidence, meaning more likely than not. Referencing the O.J. trial that my colleague Lisa mentioned, remember that was a case, there was an acquittal at the criminal level. He still had a, $33 million fine in the civil suit from the family of Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson as well. That is possible for all of the, more than 100, if my counts are accurate right now, that have been filed. I'm not sure how many are still in existence here. But I will say the judge also referencing not only Cassie Ventura, but also the pseudonymed victim Jane, who testified. Remember, those two women were the subject of the people listed in those prostitution-related charges. The judge said Miss Ventura and Jane, speaking to them, they were not in the courtroom.
I think he rocking
abuse and trauma that most of us cannot imagine.
I ain't mad at you, just my five.
For coming forward. To Miss Ventura, Jane, and the other victims here who came forward, I can only say
I ain't mad at you. That's what Pac on.
You, and your children, when they're old enough, will be proud of you. And I am proud of you for telling the world what really happened. You were speaking to the millions of women out there who have been victims but feel invisible. going on to talk about and the powerlessness as well. This is really important here because earlier today we knew that the prosecution was berating the defense team for what they believe was bullying behavior that forced, they say, one of the women who testified in this case to not speak as a victim impact statement provider in this courtroom. That's an important point here. But ultimately, again, here is the rub in our criminal justice system, Casey, and you and I have talked about the policies and beyond. But listen, even though he's convicted, with an appeal ahead of him, he never has to admit to the charges against him. He can always maintain his innocence throughout the course of the appeal and frankly for the rest of his life.
And I'm pretty sure they will appeal it.
I don't
I'm pretty sure they will appeal it.
Innocence outweighs what the jury found. That's why 50 months in prison will be appropriate, they say, for this person.
All right, you know what I'm saying? So Diddy gets 4 years, 2 months, guys, in jail, man. You know, I wonder why his attorneys didn't come out and speak like they did when he got his sentence. I mean, when he got convicted. But yeah, man. So it's looking like Diddy is going to be out before we know it. You got to serve 85% of your time in the feds. He already been in there for a year. People are saying that he will do like another year and a half, and then he'll be out. I don't know, man. But 4 years, 2 months is all Diddy got, man. I ain't gonna keep y'all all day. I appreciate everybody that pulled up. Can we get 3 more people on that like button, though? Can we get the likes at least to 200, man? You know what I'm saying? Click those 3 dots, hit that thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you are new, guys. Double tap that screen if you're on a mobile device. That's another way you can hit the like button. Let's get the like up to 200, guys. At least 200. We done had over 100,000 people in the building, man. Only got 200 likes. That's crazy. But anyways, however you feel about it, whether you think it was a light sentence or whether you think he should have just got out or whether you think he should have served 20 years, it really don't matter right now, guys. Diddy is looking to come home in 4.5 years, guys. 3.5 to be exact, because he already been in there a year. And some people saying that 85% of his time, he'll be out in 2.5 years. I most definitely feel like Diddy is going to be fine in jail. Nobody's going to mess with him. He got way too much money. He probably be in PC, you know, where he can't be touched. But look forward to Diddy getting right back out, guys. And things ain't going to be the same as they was before this. The whole world knows what kind of dude Diddy is. But don't think that everybody in the world is going to stop supporting Diddy behind what we just found out about recently. Because I want y'all to remember this. People in New York, as far as the music industry, they already knew what type of monster Diddy was way before we did. And they were still rocking with Diddy then. They gonna continue to rock with Diddy now, you know. So it just is what it is, man. You know. So shout out to my moderators, shout out to my members, my old ones as well as the new ones. Shout out to all the subscribers, the old ones as well as the new ones. Shout out to my mods. I appreciate each and every one of y'all for keeping this chat rolling smooth. I know sometimes we have a lot of people over here and things get a little crazy. I don't know what I'd do with y'all without y'all, man. I appreciate each and every one of y'all. So until I see y'all again, y'all stay safe. Y'all already know how this go. Sidewalk Gang, checking out. I'll catch y'all on the next one. I'm gone.